It's the MMA parlay, MMA parlay. 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 I'm dominating bookies. Nom they cookies. I'm dominating bookies. Nom they cookies. I'm dominating bookies. Nom they cookies. It's the MMA parlay, MMA parlay. King and fighting guru.
Ciao and aloha, and I ran out of ways to say hello because I know it in like 3 different languages only. But hello, YouTube fans, MMA fans, money-making team, anybody who likes to cash in some big money tickets, parlays, single bets, prop bets. This is your guy right here. You're tuned into the right channel. All right, we got a lot of good fights to talk about, and it's a double bubble weekend. It's a quadruple double weekend maybe, because, man, this event is, this month is full of MMA events. This is the first time ever I'm giving 10 in total, 10 events with profits to my patrons and anybody following my channel. But obviously the patrons get more picks because they get the full card picks. But even the channel, this is the best time to be a subscriber to my YouTube channel, because you got, well, actually for YouTube there may be like 7 or 8 events, not because I do KSW, LFA, and I don't make videos for those. So but in the Patreon we got 10 events. I'm handicapping, I'm giving bet slips out to, and there's a lot of juicy tickets we're going to be cashing in, because I develop a system where we don't have to count on anybody. I never met another handicapper, and you can ask anybody in a Patreon, or you can see my old bet slips. Like, people laugh about, like, oh, he gives 40 bets out. I make 40 bets, but most of them are 2-leg parlays, 3-leg parlays, 4-leg parlays. I've been known to hit 13-leg parlays, but I've developed a system where if I have $400, instead of putting 3 bets or 4 bets of $100 each, you're better off putting $20 on 20 bets, because not only will the profits be way better, my system is designed so we maximize profits while minimizing risk. We use all the entire full card, so anybody knows when you don't put all your eggs in 1 or 2 baskets only, it's safer in case something happens to that basket. You have other baskets. It's the same concept. So I've developed literally the safest system with literally the most profits possible. So I found a way to not only maximize profits, but while doing so, minimizing risks. Where even if 2 or 3 of my picks go wrong, where anybody else, if you're not doing the same amount of combinations, the different variations, and my system is very sophisticated. Let's start with one. I'm going to talk about one of the fights today. I'm going to give you, there's a beauty behind this madness. There's a reason why some fighters you'll see in more combinations, and some fighters you'll see in small parlays, some fighters you'll see in big parlays. It has not only to do with odds, the value's got to be right, the style matchup has to be right, if the fighter is trustworthy enough, the risk versus rewards. Is he a guy I can depend on to be consistent? Is he durable? Is he chinny? Is he off of any injuries, inactivity? Another thing I weigh in, is it a women's MMA? I look at my track record like anybody should do their statistics. If I took out women's MMA and heavyweight fights, because heavyweight, the better fighter doesn't always win. It could come down to power. One punch can change everything. So if I take those out, I can show my track record is above 95% accuracy. So that means I have more events with perfect picks, not even one wrong, than I have events with only one wrong. And I have more events with one wrong than more than one wrong. That's why I go above 95% accuracy. And when you have an accuracy like that, there's no need for single bets. I shouldn't be single betting anything if I can get maximum profits by using parlays. Parlays just increase the odds for the same fight. So the same fight I would have made $50 on, I'm going to make $80 on because I combined it with another safe fight, which I'll also get more value for that one as well. So before I get started, let me tell you which fight, before I give you a betting tip, and this is one of the things I'm going to start to do more on my channel because I have thousands of different things that I use to make my system flawless and bulletproof. The reason why it's so profitable every week after week, even when we have fighters that don't come through for us, you'll notice I still make profit. Even when I don't have perfect picks or more than one wrong, I still make money because I do things like such as, like this reminds me of, if you know anything about history, the famous, by the way, today's episode, we're going to talk about, let me just give you a quick rundown, a synopsis of what we're going to be discussing. I'm going to be talking about, again, I only talk about the hardest fights, the fights that people are torn between, or like an underdog. Like last week, the only reason why I even made a segment about Yoel, I'm not very high on Yoel Castro. I've even bet against him and won with Felipe. I have a beautiful, on Twitter, you'll see a parlay, a 9-leg parlay, cashed in with Carlos Felipe beating as a huge underdog, plus 200. I thought, if you look at the episode that I posted, if you look at it said underdog plus, I thought he was a plus 300 underdog. And I knew that he does not, as bad as he is, it's not warranted to be that big of an underdog. So I said you could take a shot on him as a plus 300 underdog. But we found out I made a mistake. He was a favorite. And the reason why I thought he was an underdog is because he doesn't deserve to be a favorite of minus 300 against anybody, even against the worst of the worst. So that's why my mind played tricks on me. I said, there's no way this guy's a favorite. And I assumed he was the underdog. So I hope you understand after his performance why I thought he was the underdog. Anyway, I'm sure it would make sense to think why I would have made that mistake. But today's episode is going to be discussing a fight. A lot of people, I made a poll. I took a vote. Everybody voted on this fight more than any other fight. So we're going to talk about it first. Alexander Romanov. They call him King Kong. Oh, so King Kong, you know, the guy who beats up what's his name? Godzillas and those dinosaurs. So that's King Kong, Alexander Romanov, undefeated, 13-0 record, a beast of the beasts. This guy has a lot to talk about. I'm going to teach you guys a lot of things about this guy you probably never knew about. And he's going against a guy who's undefeated in the UFC by the name of Juan Espino. Juan Espino and Alexander Romanov are going against each other because, if I'm not mistaken, this was a fight. Let me see something here. What happened to my... Anyway. So, yeah, this was a fight that... See, this guy, here's the thing I'm really concerned about with Romanov. He's got some bad luck when it comes to fights. The first 3 fights they had him booked for fell off because of COVID reasons or one reason or another. They had him like first signed with the UFC back in 2019. And in 2019, he didn't even fight because they had him scheduled. And just to give you an idea of how high on this guy the UFC is, because he was a former heavyweight champion in his older organization, Eagle FC or something like Eagle Fighting Champion, Eagle Fighting Championship. He was a champion there. He's also a 2-time medalist for the bronze. He won the bronze medal and like 12th place ranked 12th in the world for wrestling. So he's got great wrestling accolades and credentials. Also, like this guy, if you look, I know he was the first and only person in the history, until today, in the history of the entire UFC's existence, to ever have gotten a submission by using a forearm choke. It's a very unique thing, and it's something that you cannot pull it off unless you're it's similar to the same way you would have to do a neck crank. And the funny thing about that is The only other and believe it or not, this guy has 3 of these. I know it's not in the UFC. He's only done it once in the UFC, but if you go back to his regional scene record, he's got 3 forearm choke submission wins in the first round. He's got a third. The only time he's ever been outside the second round, and most of his fights have all come up, I think 5 or 6, 7 of them, something like that, have been in the first round, majority of them. One of them was outside the first round only. It was the second round submission. The only time he won outside of the second round, he's never won by decision. The closest he ever did to get to a decision was going into the third round, but he got a knockout. So he still finished the fight, which shows he's got endurance. Anybody who still has power at that division, that weight class especially, where they're usually sucking air after the first round, the fact that he could still generate power to knock someone out in the third round shows a detriment to how good his... He's very athletic. It's deceiving. If you see this guy walk past him in the streets, you'll never think he's a fighter. Believe it or not, this guy was actually, and what goes to say, I've seen him take guys that were bigger than him, because he's a big guy. He's kind of real, like, he looks like he's been sitting on a couch for too long. But if you know anything, this guy was a sumo wrestler. He's not that big. He doesn't look big enough to be a sumo wrestler, but the fact of the matter that he was a sumo wrestler going against, because you've seen what sumo wrestlers look like. So imagine this. After lifting a 50-pound dumbbell for 5 minutes, and then you let it go and lift up a TV remote control. Do you know how light that remote control will feel compared to how light it actually is? Or a 10-pound bell instead? That's what he's doing to these guys. I've seen him pick up guys. Even with the other guy, the other big guy he's fought in the UFC already, he picked him up like a featherweight. He body slammed him like nothing. And the fun, here's the thing. These guys are very similar. If you look at them on paper, this is why people are torn between who to pick. They both do the same thing. They both have all first-round finishes. They're both undefeated in the UFC. There's some key differences that you cannot ignore. One is the 10-year elder. 10 years younger is a huge advantage. It's not 5 years, 4 years. 10 years is a big... You're going to see the difference in the stamina. You're going to see the difference in the versatility, the strength. Everything is going to play in the favor of the younger guy. Now, let's look at some other differences. One guy is fearless. He doesn't mind scrapping with the best of them. You can put him in front of a Francis Ngannou, and he'll be willing to trade blows. The other guy's quite the opposite. And let me tell you, this is a reason why I assume he's fighting on the card again with Robert Whittaker. Robert Whittaker was his coach in the tough season. If you remember, he was a contestant in the heavy hitters ultimate season of the Ultimate Fighter. It was called Heavy Hitters, and he was coached by Robert Whittaker, who's the main card event fighter. So this guy is very inactive. Another problem of this disadvantage is the inactivity. His opponent's been way more active, which is a lot. At 40 years old, if you're not being active, that's very bad. Secondly, thirdly, another big difference between them is this guy does not like getting hit. If you remember John Gotti, the infamous gangster, mobster, one of the best that ever did it, he said something that I'll never forget. He said, if you never been to prison, I don't trust you. That means because this guy's a gangbanger, he's a gangster, he's a mafioso, and he doesn't want anybody in his circle that's going to do crimes with him. He's not going to associate himself with somebody who does a crime, who he knows cannot serve time and hold their own weight, and that tells them that they won't snitch and they will go and take their own heat. If anything goes down, they won't be giving away names and jeopardizing the organization by ratting them out, right? So that was a rule. John Gotti is one of the greatest and most infamous, best mobsters that ever did it. He's the most famous one until today. And that's because he had rules. I got rules too. One of the rules is if I've never seen you battle through adversity, if I've never seen you go through high-level competition, if I've never seen you battle-tested, if I've never seen you dropped from getting a good knock in the chin and come right back and fight against adversity and show me you're willing to fight, because this is a fight, right? We're not talking about a chess match, a poker tournament. This is a fight. It could get dirty. And I've never seen him go against high-level competition, and I've never seen him in any adversity. And you know what he does against low-level competition? From the second the bell starts, he doesn't set up combinations. He does the work. Did you see what we saw Derek Lewis do against Curtis Blades? How Curtis Blades was so sloppy, but Derek Lewis is a high-level striker. He's got the most knockouts in the entire company. There's not one other heavyweight. He still holds the record for the most knockout wins in the entire history of the UFC. So that's at the highest level of being a knockout artist. Luckily for Juan Espino, he's only fought against cans, guys who have less than 500 records, guys who lose more than they win almost. So he's never paid for the mistakes that he makes. And one of the biggest mistakes, if I'm a fighter, I'm a trainer teaching my fighter what to do, every one of his takedowns is the same thing. It's so sloppy because he's so uncomfortable on striking on the feet. Especially imagine when he's never been against a knockout artist. He's never been against a guy who's got the credentials. Let me tell you, I know that we haven't seen much of this King Kong guy, Alexander, but he's fought some good level competition. Guys who even have wins over guys like OSP. In his older organization, he's dominated and beat people in the first round that hold wins over guys that are still in the UFC today. So he's beat level of a competition that's way greater. He's 10 years younger. He's the way stronger guy. And he may not even be the better fighter, but the fact that he's more comfortable on the feet will make him the better stand-up fighter. And although the technically better ground game fighter, look what happened to Jillian Robertson versus Talia Santos. Excuse me. Salud. This is a quick intermission. You guys can take a 5-second break to go grab your drinks and say cheers with the Fighting Guru. This is for the homies. I'm gonna spill some out. I'm joking, because my name lady would kill me, right? Can I spill some on the floor?
No way.
Sorry, guys. I'm a squirrel trying to get a nut. Wait, how's that go? I'm just a squirrel trying to get a nut. This is her world. Back on track. All right, guys. So yeah, the level of competition is much different. Too many advantages, but here's the thing, guys. If he cannot stay in top control and if he cannot keep himself safe, it could turn into. Go back and look at, because we'll talk. I'm using this as I have so much database in my head. I can give you, but if you notice, every time I give an example of a fight, I try to give examples of fighters on the card that we're talking about. So I'll give you an example. Look at because Fabinski, what's his name, man? Bartosz Fabinski against what's his name? Andre Munoz, if I'm not mistaken, his name is. If you remember, yeah, Andre Munoz was able to get a submission on the ground over Fabinski from guard because, well, here's some differences. I mean, similar to, they have the same style, like a Gerald Meerschaert and a Juan Espino. These are guys who can submit you and they're dangerous off of their backs. Another guy on this card who could do that as well is Ramos. His name is I need some help, name lady. It's a Brazilian name. It's spelled we spell his name. Hold on, let me fix my microphone first of all. Alright. Can you look at the schedule for UFC on April 17th? Gastelum versus Whittaker. ESPN 22, April 17th. There's a Brazilian name by the guy who's fighting against Bill Algio. Bill Algio. He's fighting against Ricardo Ramos, or how do you say that?
Yeah, Ricardo Ramos.
Eh? Say it louder.
Ricardo.
Okay, so if you don't want to be a casual, you got to get this right, guys. Because anybody watching my channel should not be considered a casual anymore, okay? We're upgrading to hardcore fans. Congratulations, everybody's a hardcore now. If you say it right. So, Ricardo, not the R is silent, okay? Brazilians are weird.
It's he.
She says it's not silent because that's how they say R. So she thinks it's not silent because her R, she's saying it technically to what she thinks. So it's not silent because she says Ricardo. Say it again.
No, I don't say it like that. I say Ricardo.
Ricardo.
Yeah, Ricardo.
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 I don't know if I should thank her or punch her. Who says it? Who talks like that? You ever heard of
Ricardo Ramos.
Why do they spell it with an R? Why don't they spell it with an H-I?
That's how
the
R is supposed to sound like.
No, they're trying to find out who's a casual. That's what they're doing. They set us up, guys. Don't fall for it. They're setting us up to see if we're casuals. Ricardo
Ramos.
Ricardo Ramos. Ramos. You just say it. If I say the guy fighting, his name is...
Ricardo Ramos.
Louder.
Ricardo Ramos.
I can't hear you.
Ricardo Ramos.
All right. Ricardo, shut the heck up. Most. All right. Ricardo Lomos versus Ligo. He's another guy who's dangerous off his back. You've seen him do some crazy submissions from the bottom. He's finished fights. But here's the difference between the Gerald Michart and the reason why Ricardo Ramos was unsuccessful against his last opponent, who I made a lot of money on as an underdog, by the way. Can you believe he was an underdog? Still undefeated and an underdog. I made a killing on parlays and single bets that night. It's on my social media accounts. You can find the ticket. I think it was the same night. I made money as an underdog for Jiri Prochika, probably whatever his name is. But yeah, they were making him an underdog because power is a beautiful thing, man. Sometimes you don't have to be the strong. I mean, you don't have to be the better fighter. Look at Jillian Robertson's the way more credentialed, better ground game specialist, but she lost the ground game exchanges in battle against Talia Santos. She did the same thing. She lost against, well, it's a little different from Miranda Maverick because Miranda Maverick, although she's more powerful, she actually showed new wrinkles to her game because she didn't just win it because of being the more powerful. She used her transitions and her defense in tactics. She made it a chess game and was able to outmaneuver Jillian Robertson on the ground to gain the better position and work her way up back on the feet, and with still some time left in the round, and dominate and pick her apart on the feet once again. But that was a different way. But Santos didn't do that. She didn't make it a chess match. She turned it into a checkers match and just used her brute strength to outpower and just bully, similar to how we saw like Spike Carlisle do with Billy Quarantillo. Every time Billy Quarantillo took him down, or Benson Henderson versus Jesse Jackson in Bellator, every time Hendel would get him down, Benson would get him down, he would just flip it over and outpower him and bully him into getting the better positioning. Or sometimes we see William Knight do that as well, or try to do that. Okay, so back to the point is if he does mess up and he cannot outpower him, it's just going to take, he could be winning the fight. This is why I have rules like John Gotti does. I don't like to make heavyweight fights important part of my night. I will never put too much money or make it irrelevant or make it or break it type of a fight. As much as I'm confident in one guy having advantages and being the better fighter, he will win 9 out of 10 times, but there's still going to be that one time, that one moment that, for example, Chris Alberg, he was winning 200 strikes to 30, but it just took that one strike, that 1 second, 1 minute of the fight where he wasn't winning for the fight to be over. So this is one of those fights where it could be over after he was being dominated and So live betting, if you're a guy who likes to live bet, who has access to live betting on fights, I would imagine that there's going to be a point where one of these guys is going to be like a plus 1,000, and at any given moment, either one of them is alive to finish this fight. There's a reason why both of them never see the decision cards. So that would be another way to hedge. Also, is to bet, and so I'm a master of making parlays hedge, where it can even cash in at the same time as the one that it's protecting. So I make hedge bets that are not contradicting and opposite. So I don't make, like, if I pick one guy, I'll pick the opponent on the other. What I would do is I'll pick one guy and then I'll pick like the over rounds. So in case he loses, but by decision, I'll cash in the other one. But if he wins by decision, I cash in both of them, because I don't like to give away money for free. So it's a hedge, but not so much like a hedge, because you can still cash in both of them. That's my specialty. I find ways to maximize profits and ensure my money, so in case something goes wrong, I break even or still make some profit. That's one of the beauties of my system. I have so many tricks, guys, so many rules. So again, if a guy hasn't been battle tested, his chin hasn't been tested, he hasn't fought high level opponents, I'm never gonna make him I'm never gonna make him an important part of my night. He's never gonna be a guy I'm very confident or all in on. I'm not gonna make him a guy who messes up my 8-leg parlay, because there's enough other fighters on this card who are trustworthy, dependable. I've seen them battle tested, and I don't have to put them in a parlay with a guy who's not. So you got to have rules, you got to have discipline. I have all that, and people in my Patreon have trusted me after seeing one of the most common things that I can show you. So many people have said, I can show you several pages of people saying, look, Guru, I'm sorry, I tried it without you for the first few weeks. I took some of your bets and I made them combine with some of my bets, and I changed your bet slips to add on to this or take out this, and I regret it because I see that you guys won money and I lost money. And so from now on, I'm just going to copy and duplicate it exactly as you posted the bet slips. I even give them instructions. So I tell them exactly how to allocate their money. I don't just give them bet slips. I give them instructions with the tips and how to allocate their money. So it's very easy. You don't have to do any research. You don't have to do any thinking. You don't got to do any planning. You just say, okay, I have $1,000. Guru said make these combinations, these parlays, these prop bets, these single bets. On this single bet, he said I'm supposed to put this much money. On this parlay, I'm supposed to put this much money. If you just follow my instructions, there's no way you're ever going to lose. And if we ever do have those rare occasions where like everything happened to go wrong at the same time, robberies, bad decisions, guys showing up different than we've seen them before, better or worse opponents or whatever, if something like that happens, it's okay, because there's just one event that you can say it happened. There's no way it's going to happen 2, 3, or 4 times in the month. So there's 4, in this case, 10 events in 1 month. As long as we profit off of 5 of them, we're going to have a winning, profitable month. But there's no way we don't profit off of all of them, or at least 9 out of 10 of them, because my track record is just, I do too many things, from studying fights to having the fighting experience, the know-how, the IQ, the knowledge, I just have it. And then the system, the betting aspect, if there's anything I know more about than fighting and fighting IQ, is the betting aspects. I know which ones are subject to robberies, which ones are the ones that are going to be close fights that are risky. I have a lot of experience in betting in itself, and which ones are meant for parlays, which bets are meant for prop bets better. I can tell you everything there is to know about it, about what's the better move. So not just the best bet, and the best picks, but how to bet it as well. And it's an important factor. If you don't have both of those, neither one of those, you cannot be successful at doing this. All right, guys. So let's go back on this. So Juan Espino, he's got to prove himself to be able to battle through some adversity. He shows himself to be very afraid. The way he shoots in for takedowns, if anybody did their due diligence and researched his mistakes and try to find holes in his game, it's very easy to spot and is very unforgivable in a higher level competitions that can exploit and expose that and make him pay for that mistake. It's unforgivable. So I have to know that he's got a chin, because the first person who's going to be prepared for what he's going to do, the way he takes people down is very wrong. It's very it's very low level. It's very incorrect. It's very wrong. You're not supposed to do it that way. And that now I get why he doesn't fight often. He knows that if this guy fought every 2 or 3 months, people would catch on to his mistakes, that he's not a high level guy. He's not confident on the feet. He's very similar to like a Jordan Wright or Malcolm Gordon, who just are desperate to get the fights over with, or just not comfortable on the feet, doesn't want to get hit, and will ball up. Even when he's making his punch, even when he's throwing his punches, he does the same mistake. So it's not just in his takedowns. When he throws his punches, he does not even look. He closes his eyes and puts his head down and just swings wildly. It's loopy. It's very bad. He's very bad everywhere besides on the ground. And a guy who's winning all of his fights on the ground as well, I don't think Alexander is going to be like a fish out of water on the ground. We've seen him against black belts and dominate them and submit them on the ground. So he's a sumo wrestler. He's a wrestler. He's been wrestling since he's 12 years old. Romanov has bronze medals 2 times and has won 12th place in the world wrestling competition. So he's very credentialed. He's not going to be uncomfortable down there, but he'll be the more comfortable on the feet. And if a guy like, what's his name that he fought? A guy like Jeff Hughes was able to stuff a couple of that guy's takedowns because they're so sloppy, but he didn't make him pay for him as much. This guy can make him pay for it and probably knock him out while he's attempting those takedowns. So if Jeff Hughes can stuff a takedown from this guy, there's no chance you're going to tell me that Alexander Romanov, a guy with way better wrestling, way more better hands, more power, is not going to probably make him pay for it even worse than a guy like Jeff Hughes was able to. Although he won that fight and we make it a success, but Jeff Hughes is can of cans. You're not going to write home to mom and brag about a win over that. Even the guy who Romanov beat had a win over Jeff Hughes. One of the most recent opponents that Romanov has won against did also beat Jeff Hughes. So Jeff Hughes is a guy that anybody would be able to beat that guy. Nothing special to be bragging about. So again, low-level competition, unproven, inactive, way too old, and a bad style nightmare matchup, a guy who's very comfortable on the ground. So the value's real good, guys. It's real good. So it's worth a single bet. Plus 140, I think. Plus 120 or something like that. Let me see. Do you have the odds for Alexander Romanov?
One second.
I guess I'm a Daniel Cormier fan today, huh? DC on my sweater.
Minus 140.
Minus 140. So that's good value, guys. For every $100, you win $60. It's pretty good value for a guy with that many advantages. He's undefeated, former champion who had to relinquish his belt because he didn't lose it. He relinquished the belt. And he's got good competition on his record. Again, guys who've beat guys like OSP. They have wins over guys like OSP. So all signs point to he should win this fight. Not the safest bet though. Obviously there's way safer bets. But if you're in the Patreon today, I'm releasing a Lock of the Week segment. It's for the full Patreon. So even if you're a $10 member, if you're in my $10 tier, every week you get the Lock of the Week private segment and posts. So you get more picks than the YouTube channel gets. You get them earlier. So even the same picks that I give on YouTube, I put them earlier so you can beat line movement. My underdog of the week, which is the next fight we're going to talk about today. My underdog of the week is a guy who is being underrated, undervalued, but for more than one reason. Number one, just like the same reason I cashed in on Joseph Nathan Manez, against Luke and so many other times I've cashed it, they underrate him for the same reasons that they underrate him. He's new to the organization. He's new to this is his first fight inside the UFC, and he's fighting against a UFC veteran like Luke Sanders was. But I told you guys, as a plus 300 underdog, he should have been the favorite and not the underdog, and he showed to be the favorite when he won the fight exactly how I said he would win, using his wrestling and then eventually submitting him or ground and pounding him, which is what happened exactly. And we cashed in on the prop bets as a plus 300 underdog. Can you imagine what the prop bet was for inside the distance? I even had the right round, the second round I think it was. Anyway, so I had made some huge plus money on that one as a single bet, and that's why my record for prop bets is above 90%. I do a lot of research, guys. People don't, unless you have 60, no family, no social life, no job, or an extra 60 to 80 hours, no, 80 hours, 70 to 80 hours extra per week, which mind you, if you can, even if you put that time in, if you don't have a fighter's perspective, if you don't have the IQ and fighting experience and knowledge of a trainer or a fighter, it does you no good to watch these. You can watch them until you turn blue over and over and over, and you won't know what you're looking at compared to what I'm looking at. Anyway, so my underdog best value pick of the week, single bets and parlay worthy as well, is a guy who is coming in as a debut replacement fighter, but don't be mistaken for your normal replacement fighter. This is not a guy who's been sitting on a couch. This is a guy who's very active. He takes fights often, and he's been waiting for the call from UFC. He knew it was coming. So right now, he is in the best shape of his life, and he's in his prime. He's never been a better physical specimen than he is right now, and he's at the best years of his life. He also just had a baby. So we know Michael Chandler's, the Benil Dariush's, the Matt Danger Schnells, when they had their babies and came back, how much better did they look? And outside of 2 losses, the only 2 losses he has on his record, he's got an 8-2 record. Those 2 guys were former champions. One guy I even made a lot of money on, not just by putting him in single bets and parlays, on a live bet. If you still look, if you're in my Patreon, I want you to type in this name, Jaleel Willis. While he was in the second round by Mark Lemminger, Mark Lemminger was doing ground and pound in full guard on the top of him, looking almost like if it was going to be coming to an end. Jaleel Willis had turned into a plus 675, almost plus 700 underdog, because he was on the bottom defending from ground and pound, but there was 1 minute left only of the second round, and I knew that they were going to pull him off and he was going to survive and reach it. So I made a post saying I want you guys to lock it in as a live right now, as a live bet. Line movement took him, a guy who was the rightful favorite, who won the first round but was losing the second round. It was going to be 1-1 round, and they were going to separate them. I knew he was going to survive that round, so I said while he's still, because everybody thought it was coming to an end, so the lines moved. He survived the round, but what I said is he had a broken orbital. The guy had an eye socket that was fractured. I picked it up because it was swollen. I've done this to somebody in my past fights with a jab, mind you. I gave somebody a jab, one jab, and I messed their so I've witnessed. I know how somebody responds to this. So I said, I even made it in a comment. The guy's how do you say that thing? Orbital. What? It's a bone inside your eye that's by your eye socket. It was broken. His eyes were screwed. And I said that when they reset the third round, when they pull him off and have to reset the round, that Jaleel was going to come back and dominate and win. And he sure did. We cashed in as a plus 700. And that's why it's good. I do live notifications during the fights and sometimes live companions for my Patreon. So another huge advantage of being. So Jaleel Willis is a former champion of LFA, and he is undefeated in Bellator right now. He had an impressive win, so he's a Bellator fighter now. He's very done. And the only other guy who beat him before that, another win, was also a champion who went on and won the belt in LFA. And so Austin Hubbard himself, who's a former champion of the same organization. Oh yeah, I just gave away my pick. my underdog of the week, I like to try to lure you guys in and make it. But my underdog of the week is none other than, his nickname is, close your ears, no woman should hear this nickname, Harry Bush. And if you guys want to know how he got that nickname, only a hardcore would know this. So if you want to be a hardcore, you got to remember this story. For anybody who wonders why, what's his name? Hold on. Cody Bush, I think his name is. Or no, I'm sorry, Dakota. Dakota Bush. He was a good size underdog. The lines are moving. I think people are starting to figure it out. Yeah, I think he was almost a plus 200 underdog. Now he's like a plus 145 underdog. Still good enough value. You make more than double your money. You bet 100, you win $150 back on top of your 100. So 250 you cash out for. But Dakota Bush got his nickname Harry Bush because his grandpa and great grandpa's name were Harold. Harold's nickname is Harry, so we got Harry Bush. Okay, you can open yours now. We're finished.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Okay, so Harold Bush is a great fighter who's coming into his own. Just like I told you, Joe Selecki, let me tell you guys something about this guy, by the way, that we learned. He fights to the level of his opponent. The reason why he took out Austin Hubbard inside the first round is two reasons. Number one, he was under the impression, because everybody thinks he's very overrated. And I'm going to tell you why. It's quite the opposite. What other people, if you're not a fighter, this is what separates me from everybody else. I can even tell you why Luis Saldana actually won. People thought he got the decision wrongfully over his opponent Jordan Griffin, but Jordan Griffin rightfully lost that fight. I'll explain to you why. I actually know how to judge. I know because I can tell you exactly why they scored it for him, how he actually won. I was even doing it step by step for the patrons, so the patrons already knew he was going to win the decision. And I can tell you some wrong decisions that were made, but that was not one of them. Luis Saldana did rightfully win, but the same thing that I and everybody else did is even Daniel Cormier, as a fighter, disagreed. He thought that Luis Saldana had lost the fight to Griffin, but I knew Griffin had just renewed his contract before the fight even started. They were giving him a new contract. So that I knew he was not going to be as motivated. He didn't have as much of an incentive as his opponent, who wants to make an impressive debut. So that was another reason why I wasn't high on his opponent. I don't think Saldana's a great fighter. I don't think he's even a better fighter. I think the other guy's slightly more experienced and should have won if he was more motivated and if he had the gas tank and endurance and extra push. Like if he knew he was going to renew his contract, I probably would have switched my bet. But knowing that these are another Patreon perks. You guys don't have time to know these and research these things. You probably won't even know where to go to learn about them. And I have a database. I have a notebook full of these details. Every fighter has 3 pages full of details about them. You want to see one example of it? Let me show you one example of just one fight, okay? And this is not even the full...
Maybe this is yours?
Yeah. Okay. Here, there's more. I'll just give you some here. Okay. These are what I do, okay? Just take a look at this, guys. This is what nobody gets these. This is just from my own records. Look at this guy. He's on an 8-fight win. Look at all the things. Hasn't fought in 6. This is a Bellator fighter. He's the co-main event for Korea. Look at all the notes that I take for myself. I talk about his opponent. This is just page 1. There's more than one page. This is just, it keeps going. These are the types of notes. How can you tell me I don't miss a beat on anything? You want Pitbull? When Pitbull fights, all I got to go through is the old pages of Pitbull. You want Dakota Bush? Look, I don't even use my notes because I memorize it. This is Dakota Bush's notes. I can go all the way down. So, but anyways, I take several notes. I do my research, my due diligence. I pick up on things most people would not even pick up on. But Dakota Bush, is a guy who's coming to. He's got people like Andrew Sanchez. Nobody even know. I know people might know that he's been trained by guys like Jake Collier, UFC veteran, who's even his corner man. He corners him, but his only 2 losses, I was trying to finish saying, is against guys who were champions in LFA who have moved on to even Bellator and so on. But Austin Hubbard has also had 2 losses in LFA as well. But let me tell you why Austin Hubbard is overrated and why guys like Joe Selecki, he didn't fight to his fullest. He did that thing that I told you Pitbull does. He never puts his full foot on the pedal and slams on it. He just fights at like 60% of his capabilities. So does Joe Selecki. He doesn't fight to his maximum. He even pulled guard and let Jim Miller win some of the moments of the rounds, because he knew it was a mismatch, and that when it was time for him to start to win the fight, if he ever wanted to win the fight, he could. So he even accepted losing portion of the round and staying on his back, because he knew he can control the fight and win it anytime that he wanted to. So that's fighting at the level of his opponent. But when he knew he had a guy like Austin Hubbard, who people think that is way better than he is, he didn't want to put himself in dangerous positions or trust the judge to make the correct call. So he put him inside the first minute of the first round. That's when he was trying. Just like we saw Pitbull try and got rid of Emmanuel Sanchez quickly as well. But if he didn't try, he would have, like the first time he fought him, he went to decision. Because if you're winning, there's no need to overexert yourself. Anyways, Dakota is a guy who's got training experience and been trained and helped molded by guys like Andrew Sanchez. Andrew Sanchez, a UFC veteran, great wrestler. Jack Collier, we made money as an underdog against Gian Vellante, the pregnant Vellante I told you guys was not going to win. And we made some good money as a good size underdog in parlays. Jack, that same Collier that we won money on, is the same one that trains in corners. Dakota, Harry, close your ears. Harry Bush is a guy who's, again, he has a baby, a newborn baby, super motivated, in the best physical shape we've ever seen him in. He's a replacement for Nathan Levy, which not very high on that guy either. But I'm telling you now, his opponent, Austin Hubbard, is super overrated. Let me tell you something, for example. When Austin Hubbard, his only win in the UFC is one of his only wins in the UFC, if I'm not mistaken. Let me just fact check this. I don't want to speak without double checking. Man, there's so many things I can talk about. I don't think there's enough time on this episode, but there's so many things I can tell you. Even when I give you these YouTube segment breakdowns, unless you're in the Patreon or see my notes, because I do give them my notes on these fights. If you want the notes, I offer them to the patrons. So there's stuff that I don't have time to talk about. If I talked about everything, these segments would be hours long. I can dissect hours long of research on each fight. That's how you know I have tons of experience and knowledge, which translates, because if you can see things that clearly and dissect it that thoroughly, how can you get a fight wrong? Why do you think my accuracy is the way it is? I can tell you in every category, even when a fight is close, to me it's not close. To you guys it's close. To me it's as clear as night and day. I've never seen a fight that's close in my mind. I always can tell you, even 9 out of 10 times, if a fight is supposed to be close because they're both very evenly matched, I will tell you who will still win 9 out of 10 times because they're slightly a better fighter. Those evenly matched up fights are not problems, and I don't see as close fights, because every time, if somebody is slightly better, every time they're going to just slightly win. That's just the way it makes sense. If you have a little bit of more money than the guy next to you, you're always going to be just a little bit more rich. It's just the way it is. If somebody's just a little bit better and his opponent's a little bit worse, he's always going to just beat him by a little bit. It's going to be a good, close fight, but he'll always prevail. Okay, so I see that as easy as that, it's nothing really, there's no gray areas when I'm breaking these fights down. That's why I don't talk with the side of my mouth. I don't talk with both sides. I mean, most of these other handicappers will say, John Doe can win, but Steve Smith can also win if he does this. They're so confused that they pretty much hedge on every one of their picks. They talk out of both sides of their mouths because they're not confident, and they want to be able to say, look, I told you so, if in case something goes wrong. There's a difference between me. I'm very confident. If you notice, everybody says this about me for a reason. I'm confident because I know what I know, and when you know, you know, and it's simple as that. All right, guys. So what we were saying is my underdog, his opponent, Austin Hubbard, there's a reason why he's overrated. For example, his most recent, if we take out Max Roshpov, is a guy who's not good in MMA, and he's not a UFC caliber fighter. He was, first of all, coming in on a 10-day notice only. And 10-day notice in a debut fight is impossible for most people, guys. I gotta be honest, most people would never be able to do it. And so he quit on the stool. He told his coach, and he was quitting even before he got on the stool. In the middle of the fight, this guy was done. Any real fighter would have been able to, even the commentator said they picked up on it. Anybody, a blind man, was able to see in the middle of the fight while he was backed up into the corners and the cage, back against the cage, and just backpedaling. You don't have to take any more caution. Throw caution to the wind. Show some excitement. Austin Hubbard couldn't put away a wounded gazelle. This is a lion. Dakota Bush is a lion. This guy's got such great techniques, good wrestling, such good power. He's a .900 fighter almost. He's finished almost all of his fights, all 5 of his fights in LFA. LFA is a good organization for like prospects. All the best prospects come from LFA before they get to UFC. Most of the fighters from UFC, including Hubbard, came from LFA. He's 100% of his wins in LFA have come by finish. One of the most impressive ones was his most recent one. It was a quick first round finish, and he showed improvements on his game that he didn't have. He showed wrinkles that he didn't have in his previous fights, and he's always been good. Even the ones that he lost, he never been finished and say they were good losses by decision only. He's never been submitted or knocked out. And if he doesn't get submitted or knocked out, he's going to win a decision. He's going to win a decision because he wants it more. Austin Hubbard against the Max Roshov, who in the entire full round was done with. Any other fighter would have sensed it and capitalized and give him a finishing shot. It was just a matter of a couple punches and the guy was done with. He was still staying safe and throwing combinations and like throwing little girly kicks. And why are you doing low calf kicks and jabs when a guy's ready to be finished? This is when you're supposed to break the big guns out. Now, those things are when you're trying to win by points because he's being defensive and giving his own offense. If you cannot see the sense of urgency and capitalize and you were going to let it go to the scorecards, luckily for you, your opponents who did win a round before that, it was like a 1-1, so he was going to leave it in the judge's hands. And he had to finish all the entire round. It was there, and he didn't find it. This guy's so bad. Look, he lost to Joe Selecki in the first round. Max quit on him, so you can't even count that. So let's just go back to the other. He lost against the guy who's just he's not even a good MMA fighter. Marco Madsen's an Olympian-level wrestler, don't get me wrong, but he's not a great MMA fighter. He's just a wrestler. So a guy who doesn't even have the full, well-rounded skill sets was able to dominate him and get a decision by unanimous. He didn't even make the fight close. He doesn't have much power, doesn't have no knockout powers, doesn't have a submission game. You've seen how fast he got submitted even from the feet. He didn't even hit the ground, and Joe Selecki submitted him while they were on the feet. So before that, who do we got? A can like Kyle Prepelic. Kyle Prepelic is a guy who's got a 500 record. He's got he's got 7 losses, 14 wins, and that's not somebody who's impressive to me. He loses fights by submission, by decision, and he's on a 2-fight losing streak. And the only guys he's beat are cans. He's never even won 1 fight in the UFC. So that's not a UFC caliber fighter. So you can't give him credit for that either. The other guy, you can maybe, a guy who's 10-4, Hubbard lost to Davy Ramos, the Tasmanian Devil. he's right now on a 2-fight losing streak, although he's losing to better guys like Arman Taskurian and Islam Makhachev, but he even went to decisions with those guys. But his last win was Austin Hubbard. And he's never been, and he's a guy who even lost to Sergio Moraes, guys. So he's not like the highest level type of a fighter. And David Rickles. All right. So yeah, he's lost to even before UFC. He's lost to guys who are not champions in LFA. He lost to a guy who's got 9 losses on his record, 36 years old. And you know, Eric, they call him Little Lee. I think Little Lee, if I'm not mistaken. So, you know, this is levels, man. And to give me a plus 200 odds on a guy who's excited, he's been waiting and eager and better. He's the better physical specimen too, by the way. He's more motivated. He's got a new baby. He wants to be impressive. He's been waiting to get into the UFC for a long time. Everybody's been geeking him up. Jack Collier on his side. Andrew Sanchez, I'm very high on. He gave a great performance against Mahmoud Murdov. And before that, he did a nice knockout win against that new upcomer. What's his name? Shoot. Thurman something, I forgot. Anyways. All right, so yeah, Hubbard's just kind of a low-level fighter, no sense of urgency. He doesn't even know when his fighters are hurt. Doesn't have the best IQ. But now on the other hand, Dakota Bush. This is a guy with great wrestling. He was a champion in the regional scenes in Missouri as well. He's ranked very high in his regional or local scene. He had a 9-1 record in the regional amateur scene as well, and a lot of finishes. Let's see, he's been training for the last 8 years in MMA and all different facets of it. So he's been training for almost a decade, 9 years almost now. He's a very good heavy pressure wrestler. He's got good heavy pressure, non-stop forward pressure, and he capitalizes. Like if you're going for takedowns, he does that thing that Robert Whittaker is very good at, where he sets it up his punch and his kick he follows with a kick right after his punch. Because you duck your head, it's perfect. I could see it, and his elbows are very sharp. He's got a great elbow. That's how he hurt his last opponent, using elbows in the clinch. When he separates from the clinch and off the cage, he's an expert at giving some punishment. So very impressive, very dangerous everywhere it goes. He was also trained not just by Pat Smith, his current trainer, but he's a guy that moves around, and he trains with other guys like Mike Rogers, who's trained some of the best UFC fighters. His favorite submission that he really loves, so it wouldn't surprise me if he ever gets a low level enough. He's gonna try to go for a Darce choke. He's always mentioned that was his favorite. If you know anything about him and pay attention to his interviews, Darce choke is his favorite submission. So that shows that he practices those types of submissions a lot. And he's already got like 3 or 4 rear naked chokes under his belt. So he does have good submission victories already. Let's see here. Yeah, so he's in a good shape. I don't expect him to be... Another reason why the line is so wide is they expect him not to have the durability because he's a short notice replacement fight, but he's in the best shape of his life. He's got great cardio. He doesn't slow down. Keeps a good pace even for 5 rounds. I've seen him in 5-round fights do very well. So not worried about that. He's a great underdog if I've ever seen one. Fights out of the Smith pit. He's a great specimen. Again, he's going to be the younger, not younger, but yeah, a little bit. But he's just a physical, better specimen, more motivated, more incentives for him, having a new baby especially. So I'm high on him right now. He's looking the best shape of his life. Coming off the momentum he's got right now, he's coming off a couple of wins as opposed to a loss like Hubbard. So the momentum is on his side as well. Now I'm going to give you guys, not a long story short, stay away if you guys are not advanced. This card is very tricky. There's some fighters who are big favorites and some fighters who are appealing as underdogs. Don't try to handicap a card like this if you're not a professional. I'm telling you now, there's very sneaky, tricky types of fights that people will think that one thing is supposed to happen, but it's quite the opposite. Where the guy who's the favorite on paper and should be the favorite is actually fighting against somebody who's a style nightmare matchup, and there's not a good enough risk versus reward for you to be betting it. So trust me, it's worth it to be on the Patreon. I consider all these things. There's a reason why when we only got one wrong, for example, on the Hermanson card or the one wrong on the Bellator card, and it was a robbery, I knew it was a risky one. I even told people before the fight I have a bad feeling. I know he'll win. He's supposed to win, but I even said I had a bad feeling. And then he ends up getting robbed. But there's a reason why he was one of my most confident picks, but he was the most smallest used parlay piece. I had guys that were used 13 times, 13 different parlays. I wasn't even as confident in, but I was confident in. But this guy who I was very confident in was in only 2 parlays. I do this every time. I've come accustomed, I've even mastered knowing which ones are the risky fights, not based off of fighting, just outside the ring circumstances, name value, who's got the more money coming in on them. Is this guy been steamrolled? Is the betting market been pounding away at him? And now the Vegas machine knows that if he gets into a close fight, the more beneficial decision would be to go against him and make him lose, like the D-Rod fight, his last fight before Mike Perry. He had dominated and won, but the Arlovsky-Bozer fight, another tricky one. You got to be careful if you're betting for or against Arlovsky. I suggest you join the Patreon. If you're a guy who wants to bet on all the fights, like I give to the patrons, if we bet on all the fights, don't do this one on your own, guys. You can join the Patreon. There's $10 tiers, $50 tiers, $100 tiers, and then the maximum, which includes Bellator combined events. So every fight you get maximum profit because I take the cream of the crop, my most confident picks from Bellator and UFC, and put them in parlays together because they're back-to-back, 16th and the 17th, 2 days in a row. So why not take advantage of double the value, safer? This is, again, another way I found out how to make my bets safer and more profits. So instead of having to put more, if you give me 26 fights, this is logic, common sense. If you give me 26 fights, I'll give you more safer fighters than if you give me 12 fights, right? So I have more tier 1, level 1, worthy, trustworthy fighters, meaning I can make bigger parlays, better odds, without having higher risks. It's actually lower risks because if I had to put the same amount of people, but using other fighters who are not the cream of the crop, because now I only have 12 fights, I got to settle for a guy who's not as trustworthy as somebody who was more trustworthy because I have more fights in 2 different cards. I can give you tier 1 from this card, tier 1 from that card, instead of having to give you tier 1 and tier 2 in the same parlays. I can make parlays with only tier 1 guys, enough of those alone to make us huge profits. Another new thing I'm doing in the Patreon, everybody's going to start to notice a new thing I'm doing is I'm going to also start giving you my top 3 picks in earlier in the week before the bet slips come out. I'm going to tell you these are my 3 most confident picks, and I'm going to give them to you in order. And when the bet slips are finally out after the weigh-in observations and the stare-down observations, I'm going to also give you my order, my tier 1, tier 2, tier 3, and which ones are my most confident. So I'll say this guy, forget about value, forget about my most confident pick, the most biggest, surest winner in my eyes that will not lose, most likely, the least likely to lose. I'll give you that pick in order from most confident to least confident. So you guys know who to put the more money on, the least money on, the more. So if you ever want to duplicate my bet slips or add more bets to my bet slips, I'm giving you a map, a key to make your own additional parlays if you wanted to, or just know who to make extra single bets on maybe, or something like that, you know. I'm also going to give you my prop bets, and my prop bets have nothing to do with value. They're always going to be the most likely outcome. The outcome that I see is going to be the most likely thing to happen more often than not. If they fought 10 times, this knockout, or would it be by decision, would it be by submission, based off my research, which is the most likely outcome for every single fight. I'll give you that for all the fights for Bellator and UFC. I'm also going to do the April 24th on the same day we're getting UFC 261. There's a good KSW event. I'm going to include that as well for anybody who can bet on KSW. I'll be throwing that event in as well. So we got 10 events this month. All right, guys. Please don't forget, I don't get paid for YouTube. I do spend a lot of time researching. If you can pay me back, just leave a comment. If you're not going to like my videos, at least leave a comment. Comments are very important for my YouTube content to get pushed out. The algorithm for YouTube's content, if they see more comments, more traffic can start to see my videos, which helps everybody. I'll put more content out. Once I reach 1,000 subscribers, we can do super live chats. You can ask me questions and I can interact with you guys, get to know you guys a lot more better, and we'll be able to know each other by a name by name basis. So we'll have built a rapport, a relationship with each other much better, more content. And once I get to 1,000 subscribers, and you'll help me by not just subscribing, but by making comments. So please, even if you say, I hate you, Fighting Guru, you're the worst person in the world, put it in the comments. And hit the likes and the bell notifications, because these are time-sensitive matters. People like this guy were almost a plus 200 underdog, and the line is moving fast. So you don't want to be the guy who gets the last, but you want to get the reminders first. Thank you for your time. Good luck on your bets. I gave you the underdog of the week. I'll give you a caution. Don't bet on fights like the Andre Arlovski fight. I gave you a warning. Don't bet on that fight if you don't know what you're doing. And I gave you a good value pick that everybody wants to think that is a hard fight to call, with two undefeated undefeated in the UFC fighters. The King Kong versus Espino. Juan Espino. So I gave, who's only got one loss on his record, by the way, but still undefeated in the UFC. He hasn't had a loss, by the way, since TKO in 2011 in 9 seconds. By the way, he got knocked out in 9, and you know why? Probably somebody had realized this guy immediately. It is not a surprise. Me too. If I fought this guy, it's going to happen in 9 seconds, because he does the same thing every time, and he does it the same way. You can tell exactly what he's going to do and how he's going to do it and when he's going to do it. When, how, where, everything. He does it. He never changes it up. It's the same thing in the same way, and even worse, it's wrong. He does it wrong. He doesn't even do it right. It's wrong. You're not supposed to do it that way. It's very unforgivable at the higher levels. I'm telling you now, he's going to get knocked out every time if he ever makes it to the higher ranking of fighters. And he lost to a guy, Vitaly Minikov, who's got wins in Bellator against like Timothy Johnson. He just lost to Chikongo, but pretty decent guy. So nothing to be ashamed of. He's a pretty good, decent fighter that he's got his one loss. But that was 2011. You can't really count that against him since it was over a decade ago. All right, guys, thank you. Hit the like, hit the reminder, make a comment, or the Fighting Guru is going to come at you. All right, see you soon in the next video.